Welcome everyone to this open house gallery talk. This is the opening party celebration of Just In Schofield, celebrating the art of Uncle Elmer. On view today at Woodmere, although sadly the exhibition will be closed to the public for the next 5 weeks. As I'm guessing most people know, the city of Philadelphia made a decision that museums would be closed through January 1st. We will be extending the exhibition. Our hope was you'd be so excited after this gallery talk that you'd be, online tomorrow morning, first thing at 10 o'clock when the museum opens to see the exhibition. And that is not, alas, going to be possible to happen. But we are incredibly excited about this show. And I want to thank you all for joining us. My name is Bill Valerio. I'm the director of Woodmere. And the exhibition is so exciting to me because it represents so much growth in the relationship between Woodmere as an institution and the work of a particular artist that is incredibly important to us as an institution and as a community. Walter Elmer Schofield, known in Chestnut Hill as Uncle Elmer, lived in Chestnut Hill. He divided his time between Westmoreland Street, where he lived under the roof of the family house. It was actually his brother's home on Westmoreland Street from, pretty much September through May or June every year. And then he lived in Cornwall in England, where he had a spectacular home. But he painted all through, the Delaware Valley, the Wissahickon watershed area, New Hope, Pennsylvania, Bucks County, up through New England, then would paint in France, would paint in Europe over the summers. But Uncle Elmer, as he was known to his niece, was an affable, fun-loving uncle who would sometimes start a Saturday morning saying to his niece, "Let's call all of your friends on the phone and let's have a fun day downtown in Philadelphia. Let's go to Center City, go to the movies, let's have milkshakes for lunch and, ice cream for dinner." So a much loved, extroverted, social fellow who is a national artist as well. And this exhibition very much celebrates a new gift, just in, of many works by Schofield, important paintings that have been entrusted to the institution by the artist's family, and in particular by the artist's niece, Peg Phillips. So we're calling the exhibition Celebrating the Art of Uncle Elmer. And I'm starting with an image of a needlepoint. This is a needlepoint design that the artist, Schofield, Uncle Elmer, made at the request of his niece. And Peg, did the actual needlepoint work. This is an image of her beautiful home in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And it was one of Peg's prized possession. It counts as a work of art, and it gives a sense, I think, of Schofield, who's, not a stuffy artist. He's game for anything, and to contribute to the creativity of his niece, Peg, he makes this wonderful needlepoint design, which is on view in the exhibition. We are thrilled to have the needlepoint. And I love objects like this because these are the things that bring an artist to life as a three-dimensional being. I'm starting here with some views of the galleries. You can see large, beautiful, luscious paintings set up in juxtaposition to each other. Again, The exhibition will remain up on our walls, but we look forward to be opening again in January. So you can see them. Woodmere's personal relationship with Schofield goes back to the time of the directorship of Edith Emerson. Edith was the director of Woodmere from the early 1940s to 1978, and she was a personal friend of Elmer's. Everybody knew him as Elmer. To the family, he was Uncle Elmer. Edith and Elmer were friends going way back. Edith was close friends with the group of artists that we call the Pennsylvania Impressionists. And at the time of Schofield's death in 1944, Edith worked with Schofield's niece, Sarah Schofield Phillips, to organize a memorial exhibition at Woodmere. And it was at that time that Woodmere's first paintings by Schofield came into the collection. This was Sarah Schofield Phillips working together with the artist's two sons and selecting what they believed were important works to represent Schofield in perpetuity at Woodmere. And I'm showing one of those paintings that was given to Woodmere at the time by the family, Trenwith Cornish Farms, from 1932. And it's one of the very large, most ambitious, most interesting, I believe, paintings that Schofield did, bringing together the Cornish coast with views of a specific farm, the Trenwith farm, that still stands in Cornwall. Schofield painted the Wissahickon, and I will never forget the first time I saw this painting, Winter on the Wissahickon, when I was visiting Peg in her home. Peg has passed away in recent years, but when I saw this painting with Winter on the Wissahickon, which he made right on Forbidden Drive, walking distance from where Woodmere is, I felt, wow, this is a painting that could be the logo for Chestnut Hill, period, and for the Wissahickon, but something that was so deeply embedded into so many things that we care about in our community. Schofield was an artist who painted outdoors in nature as well as in the studio, and I'll talk a little bit more about his practice as we go along. But this is a painting that captures the growth and the beauty, of the Wissahickon, a place that he knew, and a place that he knew was being revitalized. He was social in Chestnut Hill with the Woodward family and was aware of their work together with the city of Philadelphia to replant the Wissahickon, to remove the paper mills and factories that were putting pollution into the Wissahickon. And Schofield was, indeed aware that this amazing natural resource was something that was precious. And he gives us a sense of its formal majesty. I'm showing it together with a photograph by my friend Ron Tarver. Ron is a contemporary photographer that we've worked with. We've shown his work at Woodmere many times. And Ron has also taught at Woodmere, has taught photography. And when Winter on the Wissahickon first came under our roof a few years ago, we put it on view. And Ron decided to take a photography class out to the Wissahickon to try to find the spot that Schofield painted. And everyone in the class was given the assignment to make a photograph there. And I'm showing this photograph, Flo, made by Ron, the teacher of something that attracted him in that spot. And again, it's not this majestic formal view of nature's glory, but it's the action of water rushing over, past through stones that are on the river. So there's this sense of passage of time. I'm also showing another very special, very important painting in the exhibition, Nearing Spring. This is a work that was purchased as the result of some funds that Peg put aside for the purpose of purchasing paintings by Schofield. This is a painting that he made in New England, and it may have been on a visit to Great Barrington that this this outdoor scene, this outdoor winter scene was made, this New England scene. My goal with this gallery talk is to walk us through the major works of art that are on view in the exhibition and to give a picture of what it is that I believe makes Walter Elmer Schofield a special and interesting artist, and to convey how proud and how happy I am that it is Woodmere's honor and responsibility now with this exhibition to steward his legacy in perpetuity. And it is with these amazing gifts that Woodmere really can tell the story of Schofield's life and career from beginning to end. And that's in a way what I'm going to do. Please, by all means, put questions in the Q&A or in the chat. Joe Pompili and Ann Standish are going to be monitoring that for me, and I'll be very glad to have discussion and answer questions at the end of the talk. I wanted to describe a little bit about how Schofield has been something of a misfit in the literature, in the scholarship on Pennsylvania Impressionism. And that's in part because although Schofield is very much participating in the Bucks County Pennsylvania Impressionist exhibitions, he's part of that conversation. He's also a Philadelphia guy, and he's British. And, you know, he's spending his summer in Cornwall and in France and in Belgium. And so he's not quite, he's not quite situated, physically, intellectually, fully immersed in the life of Bucks County. And I'm showing two major important books that, in my view, are foundational publications in the understanding that we all have of Pennsylvania Impressionism. One is written and produced by Jim Alterman of Jim's of Lambertville, New Hope for American Art, and it very much situates Pennsylvania Impressionism in New Hope, where the gallery is located and where so many of these artists worked. Schofield is, of course, included, but again, he's a little bit out of place there. And I would say the same with regard to the amazing book. And, I also revere this book very much, produced by my good friend Brian Peterson at the Michener Museum, Pennsylvania Impressionism, scholarship by Brian Peterson, Bill Gertz, Sylvia Yunt, and others. And again, the Michener Museum has been instrumental in bringing us Pennsylvania Impressionism. And I think the Micheners hold and the Micheners focus on Bucks County artists has created a view of Pennsylvania Impressionism that, again, Schofield, doesn't fit into quite so well. Again, he's much more of a Philadelphia gentleman. He's not a scruffy guy living out in the country. If you think of, Edward Redfield, who won't eat anything he didn't trap himself. Schofield is not like that at all. He's much more likely to being out dining in a fine restaurant in the evening than catching his own food, and certainly living in the countryside. In this book, however, an article that has been inspiring to me, all of the articles in the book are inspiring to me, but particularly of interest is the contribution of Sylvia Yunt. Many of you will know Sylvia is the curator of American art, the director of the American wing at the Metropolitan Museum of New York now. But at the time of this writing, Sylvia was the curator of American art at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. And her contribution very much focuses our attention on the broader context in which Pennsylvania Impressionism, as we know it, takes place. And it has a lot to do, as Sylvia demonstrates, with what's going on at PAFA and what's going on in Philadelphia. And to me, that is a starting point for my understanding of Schofield. So I do want to recognize um, everyone that I've just mentioned as foundational in really bringing us to an understanding of these artists and Schofield, although I've felt for a long time that there's more to be done in order to build an understanding of Schofield. And so with that introduction of Sylvia's opening of the conversation to the broader picture of how these artists fit in American art, I want to talk a little bit about Impressionism in America, and specifically Impressionism in Philadelphia. So French Impressionism bursts onto the world stage in 1872. It's a group of artists who decide to show their work together. And because because their work is new and challenging, and because the title of one such painting, which I will actually show shortly by Claude Monet, is called Impression Sunrise, someone derisively calls the movement Impressionism. There was one American artist in the core group of French Impressionists showing in those very first exhibitions of Impressionism, and that is American artist Mary Cassatt. Philadelphia, through Cassatt, has a very direct line right into the center of Impressionism as a movement and into the very founding of what Impressionism is. And I'm showing a very spectacular pastel by Mary Cassatt, The Pink Sash, that is on long-term loan to Woodmere and that we are planning to show this spring in an exhibition that's very much about what you're seeing on this screen, which is artists in Philadelphia who are instrumental in encouraging American artists to be looking at French Impressionism. And this is not only Mary Cassatt, but her very close friend, George Biddle, something of a younger protege, and Adolphe Bory. And these are artists from distinguished Philadelphia families, artists who are going to Paris, are excited about what they're seeing, and bringing French Impressionism back to the United States. All of this happening in the context of the Chicago International Exposition of 1893, when French Impressionism is really shown for the first time in a big way in America. And in Chicago in 1893, Impressionism makes its first big splash in America, and all of a sudden, everybody is thinking about French Impressionism in the major cities of the United States. But in a lot of ways, I feel like Philadelphia has a leg up, in part because of Cassatt, and in part because of Bory and Biddle, and artists who have already recognized and are engaged with French Impressionism. I'm showing a spectacular painting, a large painting by Adolphe Bory, The Chorus Girl, that is his very direct quotation and reinterpretation of one of the great chestnut paintings of all of art history, but certainly of French Impressionism, and that is Mayonnaise Olympia. And this is, in some ways, the Philadelphia version of Mayonnaise Olympia. As a result of the Chicago International Exposition in 1893, all of a sudden, Impressionist groups start forming across the United States, in Connecticut, in Boston, and New Hope, Pennsylvania. And the founder of the art colony in New Hope, Pennsylvania is landscape painter William Langston Lathrop, who moves there in 1899. He acquires the Phillips Mill, which you see down below, and he sets out to create an art-making group. And these are artists immersed in Impressionism. And they're not so much looking at Impressionism in figurative art, which Cassatt and Bory and Biddle are. They are figurative artists. In New Hope, and in the hands of Lathrop, this is a landscape movement. And at the turn of the century, in the year, in 1899 and 1900, Lathrop is one of the most recognized, most celebrated gold medal winning painters in America. And what Lathrop does that really captures the national imagination and the mood in the art community at the time is to create these moody landscapes, twilight after the farm. And again, if you were standing in front of this painting in person, you can see there's a canal and there's a road, and they both recede in space together, and different things are happening on the road and on the canal, and they all lead your eye to this edge of sunshine, or the edge of twilight, of the light of twilight, right at the horizon, which then casts tonal shadows across a dramatic sky. These are the paintings that really establish the New Hope colony as a place that artists want to flock to and live there. And people do come and want to live in this community with Lathrop. And Schofield is attracted to this community, although of course he's not going to live there, but he's liking what he sees going on in New Hope. I thought I would back up and give a little bit of the trajectory, having described the contexts, the major contexts that sort of, I think, inform Schofield's work in terms of Impressionism America. I want to back up now and just get a little bit biographical about Schofield and give a sense of who he was as a person. And I think we get a sense of an extraordinary American story by just looking at the range of homes in which he lived. Schofield was born in 1867, 1866 or 1867, right after the Civil War has ended, in a row house, a modest workers' row house, 1529 North Lawrence Street in North Philadelphia. His father has lived in Philadelphia. His parents have lived in Philadelphia for about, I think 15 years by that point. And both of his parents are immigrants from England, and they've come to America to create a fortune. And indeed, Schofield's father starts a thread company, opens a factory in Kensington, and has a business that becomes very successful, providing thread to the garment industry, first in Philadelphia, across Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh, and then beyond from there. A company that becomes very much embedded in American industry. And after not very long, the family moves from North Lawrence Street to a larger, elegant Victorian home called Wyndhurst in the Ogontz section of Philadelphia. I believe that house is no longer standing. And then when Schofield's father dies, Schofield and his brother and his 3 sisters inherit quite a fortune. Everybody buys houses somewhere. His brother buys a large house in Chestnut Hill on Westmoreland Street. Schofield buys a home in England, Otley High House in Suffolk. And it's kind of like, well, you can come stay with me when you want to be in England. You can come stay with me when you want to be in America. Schofield has aunts with homes in Maine. And Schofield creates a life for himself where, again, from fall through spring, he's in Chestnut Hill, and he's participating in exhibitions across the United States from Chestnut Hill, from his brother's home, and then he's traveling around Europe in the summer. Later in life, Schofield sold Otley High House, and together with his son, and I believe it was his son's actual purchase, the great historic mansion Godolphin one of the anchoring historic homes in Cornwall, used as a set on the Poldark television show Godolphin House, which dates back to the 18th century and is is a gigantic estate with woods and acreage, and this will be eventually where Schofield dies. His son Sidney is a preservation-minded architect and really takes on Godolphin as a labor of love and restores this great mansion, which is part of the National Trust. But the Schofield family's story is a storybook, great American success story. And Schofield is a lucky man. He's able to work as an artist with support and income. Although, again, I'll be talking about this a little bit. He does well as an artist. Now, Schofield is born in North Philadelphia. He's living in Ogontz in Windhurst and starts attending PAFA. And I'm showing a somewhat famous photograph in PAFA where, many artists of the turn of the century, well, of the these are artists who are attending PAFA, I want to say circa 1890, I believe is the photograph. Schofield is labeled #1. Some of these young men are dressed up as cowboys or bandits. Schofield, you see with the funny hat, in the center, labeled #1. There's Redfield, there's Glackens, there's Robert Henry. They're all, the sculptor Grafley is there. They're yucking it up. Famous photograph of the cohort in which Schofield is a part. Among his teachers, who's so important, and again, here's where I have to tip my hat to Sylvia, Robert Vano, an American Impressionist painter who is recruited from Boston to come teach at PAFA. And he brings a kind of Impressionism to the curriculum at PAFA that is incredibly important to Schofield, Redfield. And I'm showing a painting in Woodmere's collection in the Connecticut Hills by Vano as an example of the kind of painterly landscapes that would have inspired this generation of artists. No sooner does Schofield complete his studies at PAFA that he's off to Europe. Like so many other American artists, he makes several trips, especially traveling through France. One such trip in 1894, he goes together with Robert Henry and William Glackens, his close friends. And you see this funny cartoon by Robert Henry, me, Sco, Glack. They all had nicknames for each other. And Schofield was Sco, Glackens was Glackens, obviously. And this cartoon where they all have these gigantic rear ends just makes me laugh every time that I see it. But they are traveling through Europe together, young American artists, and they're there to experience the glories of Europe and certainly European art. Getting into our exhibition, a work that is on view and is a recent gift from Peg, Montmartre, a painting that Schofield made in 1896 after traveling around with Henry and Glackens. He landed in Paris and decided he would stay there for some time and continue his studies at the Académie Julienne, where Bouguereau, William Adolphe Bouguereau, the great academic artist, the great academician, would be his main teacher. And I always imagined, Schofield wasn't really interested in anything that could have been happening at the Académie Julienne until I put this this very famous Bouguereau painting at the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown. It's a painting I feel I went to college with. I went to Williams College. But this gigantic Bouguereau painting, looking at this Schofield, this is Schofield's view out of the window of the apartment that he rented, the cafe and bistro that he probably took his meals in, or at least, that's what I've been told. was the significance or what the family's belief, about this painting always was. Um, you can see Schofield, as a very young artist. I mean, he's 29 years old. He's living in Paris. He's on top of the world. And, I feel that what this painting is about is how exciting it is to be in Paris and to be 29 years old and to be, launching your career as an artist. What interested me, again, let me talk a little bit about Bouguereau, is structure. The Bouguereau painting balances on that lowest foot of the frontmost satyr, the way Schofield's painting, balances on that corner and that flagpole that's in the front center. The Bouguereau painting is highly structured, although it's a big tangle of these figures out in the woods and they're moving all around, and it's full of life and energy. Nonetheless, if you follow, any one line, it leads you to another. So a foot leads you to an elbow, or the diagonal of a shoulder leads to a fabric, which leads to a leg. And so the painting has a very tight structure that has something of a linear grid sort of within it. And I think you can see that as well in the Schofield painting. It had not occurred to me, but this is how art history happens. You put two things next to each other and suddenly you see relationships. So Schofield is studying in Paris and he makes this picture that I think is really about the glory of simply being there. Now, when Montmartre arrived, it was dirty and had some other conservation problems. And I'm showing here a before and after. I mean, what you're really seeing, these are two photographs taken at different times with different lighting conditions. So there's no real accuracy here, but I think you can see there was a layer of grayish grime across the painting, as you can see it on the left. And removing that grime layer, the colors pop out. The painting is so much more vibrant. But there are other differences that are significant here, and significant compositionally. Having just talked about the Bouguereau and the degree to which the composition balances on a point at the center. When the painting arrived, you can see that, about an inch on the bottom and on the right was missing. The painting had been stretched around a smaller stretcher to fit into a frame that was completely inappropriate. To begin with, it shouldn't have been in that frame, in my opinion, in terms of taste. But in terms of what happened to the painting, we lost something very important. And I think you can see the difference from left to right by restoring, by having a new stretcher made and having the painting re-stretched around a stretcher that was the original size. The painting opens up, and that the two bottommost figures are no longer cut off. It's what helps you enter into the scene. If this painting is about how wonderful it is to be in Paris, Schofield wants you to enter into this world with him. I think that's what's so special about the painting. That invitation was lost with the incorrect, reframing of the painting. What we also lost along the right margin was the word hot, H-O-T. It became ho. Of course, that building is a hotel, but this is a guy with a real sense of humor. He's an American living in Paris. It's the summer and it's hot. And I think he's just kind of letting us know that. And so by restoring that left edge, we were able to restore the word, H-O-T of hotel, but we get to smile at what that means in the English language. And cleaning the painting brought back just the beauty of the calligraphy all throughout. French flags, curtains with tassels and windows, signage, Beautiful brushwork all throughout, which um, was obscured before. It was hard to see through the grime. What is Schofield looking at in the 1890s in Paris? Well, I've always imagined that these paintings by Camille Pizarro of the French city that were made in the late 18, 1890s, could have easily inspired Schofield. And then what was so interesting to me was to realize that this particular example of one that I know very well because it's at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, gift of Helen Tyson Madeira, purchased by Schofield's friend, Carol Tyson, also of Chestnut Hill. Carol Tyson, wonderful painter, philanthropist in the arts, great art collector. We would not have the Pizarro painting at the PMA or the Van Gogh sunflowers for that matter, were it not for Carol Tyson. And so Schofield is absolutely looking at French Impressionism. He's certainly seeing these paintings by Camille Pizarro in France. And there's something that I've always thought about with Schofield in relation to Pizarro. That is something of the scumbled up kind of painting application that you get from Pizarro. Pizarro loves the countryside, although Impressionism has its heart in Paris. It's also depicting the French countryside and the beauty of the countryside as the backbone of the nation. And I associate this color orange with Schofield. And this is one of this painting, Red Roofs by Pizarro. It's one of the chestnut paintings of French Impressionism. One of the paintings becomes very, very famous early on. It's in that one of those first Impressionist exhibitions in the 1870s. And I just can't help but point out that while this painting is known as the Red Roofs, they're kind of orange, and Schofield, of course, makes his roofs of the Montmartre buildings bright orange as well. So, I would venture to say that there's something about Pizarro going on in Schofield's mind. I also wanted to describe, I mentioned before that when the painting arrived, it had a bad 1950s version of a French frame on it. It was sort of a 1950s idea of what a sort of a Rococo frame might be. And it really, in my mind, interfered with the painting. We were able to commission, again, thanks to Peg, a frame of the sort that Schofield would often select for his own paintings by his friends Bernard Badura and Frederick Harrer. And I'm showing examples of Badura and Harrer frames. The Harrer frame on the right is actually a frame that's on a painting in the show. It is original to a Schofield painting. And you can see how Harrer and Badura loved making little cartoons and images in that railing plank in between the inner and the outer lip of the painting. And we decided to have some fun with Montmartre. It definitely needed a silver frame, and Schofield often selected silver frames for his paintings because a gold frame would interfere so much with the gold tonalities in the Montmartre painting. So we decided it needed a silver frame. And just to have some fun, you can see, I encouraged Dean Kahn, who is one of the great frame conservators and frame makers of America. Dean is my former colleague at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. He now works independently with his own frame restoring and making business in Washington, D.C. And I invited Dean to get creative, and he looked at Badura frames and looked at Harrer frames. There are, in fact, frames by these makers that have fleur-de-lis in them with French subjects. And we decided to go a little bit wild, and you can see these vignettes of, the great monuments of Paris, the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, and I'll let you all have the fun of identifying the other buildings, but they appear, up above and on the bottom of the frame. And we hope everybody enjoys seeing this. Another great painting, an early masterpiece by Schofield, an important painting, I believe, from 1908. So, a good decade later than the Montmartre painting, but also made in France, in Boulogne, on the Normandy coast, an industrial port scene, steam trawlers Boulogne. And steam trawlers, if you know what a trawler is, it's a boat that dredges a harbor. It can drag a net. It's the sturdiest of the work boats. And I believe this painting is so important because it shows that Schofield is part of this conversation in American art in the first decade of the 20th century, that his friends, Clackens and Henry and John Sloan in New York, who are his lifelong friends, they are creating something that's known as the Ashcan School. And Schofield, there's no question in my mind, is part of that conversation. The Ashcan School is looking at tugboats. I'm showing Glackens' tugboat and lighter in the New York Harbor. You can see the Statue of Liberty in the back there. And they're looking at, for a tugboat for Glackens is a symbol of the good strength that comes from honest work. The tugboat is a lowly boat, but yet it's so powerful and it's symbolic for Glackens. And I believe the trawlers are too. I think what you can also see in the steam trawlers is that, again, Schofield is continuing to look at French Impressionism. Boulogne is right next to Le Havre, which is the site of the painting that launched the movement Impression Sunrise, which is by Monet, which is a scene of, the industrial port of Le Havre. And, Monet is using paint to convey a sense of atmosphere, of smoke. This is a working port, and light and smoke, represents, the sunrise is, this is the rise of industrial Europe, which is positive to Monet. And I believe it's positive to Schofield as well, the son of an industrialist in Philadelphia with a factory in Kensington. But there's no question in my mind that these early paintings by Schofield are very much about, the strength of modern industry and an optimism there, that the smoke from the chimney of the trawler, obscures the view of the city beyond. And, that's not a negative thing. That is just a condition of what it means to be part of modern life. Steam Trawlers also has a spectacular frame, and this is not a frame that's original to the painting. I have to give Jim Alterman credit for selecting this frame for the painting. It's perfect. It's a very good turn of the century Newcomb Macklin frame. Newcomb Macklin was a frame maker in Chicago. Their turn of the century frames, to me, have 1 foot in the Beaux-Arts and 1 foot in Art Nouveau, and maybe even a little bit of arts and crafts. This was a frame company that Schofield sometimes invested in. To buy one of their good frames like this would be to spend money and to invest in the presentation of your work. And I'm thrilled that we're able to present this painting as such a fine package with the beautiful Newcomb Macklin frame. Again, not original to the painting, but appropriate because this was a frame maker that we know Schofield sometimes selected. And, the frame is very much a work of art. Another painting that is in the show that is a showstopper is Early Winter Morning, made about a year later than the Steam Trawlers. And it's a view of the Delaware River, probably right outside of New Hope, and a canal coming into the river. It's where the canal has, there's a man-made embankment that snakes its way inward towards the Delaware River. There's the canal on the left, and there's a ditch on the right. Trees march back into space. There's a sensuality to the way space itself is handled in this painting, and the the round quality of these Earth-like forms that move back in space. And with this painting, I wanted to read a quotation from Schofield to give a sense of, how he spoke about his art and how he thought of himself in very masculine ways as a painter. The landscape painter is of necessity an outdoors man, for vitality and convincing quality only come to the man who serves not in the studio, but out in the open, where even the things he fights against strengthen him, because you see, nature is always vital, even in her implicit moods, and never denies a vision to the real lover. Schofield does see his practice in sensual terms. He is a lover of nature. He's making love of nature. And I think you can see that in this painting, that these sensuous forms are like the sensuality of the human body in the hands of a figurative painter. And this is someplace where the image does not do the painting justice at all, because it positively glows. The overall tonalities are gold mixed in with earthy greens and browns and cool greenish black blues in the water. A painting of great beauty and sensuality. And these are actually the paintings. It was paintings like this that made Schofield's reputation. If in the year 1900, Lathrop is America's premier landscape artist, by 1908, 1909, 1910, it is Schofield and it is his colleague and friend, Edward Redfield, who are winning the big prizes in American art. And these are the reputation building paintings that are getting gold medals in the Carnegie International, in the San Francisco World's Fair, at the New York Academy. These are the paintings that are making a splash and are building, a career for the artist that is going to last throughout his lifetime. Just to give you a sense of the paint handling and the beautiful fresh quality of the paint. Again, this painting was very dirty. And my friend Stephen Arasati, the painting conservator, who I hope may be on this Zoom call, said that actually somebody smeared tile adhesive on the painting at one point that had to be removed at great difficulty. But I think you can see how fresh the painting feels, how sculptural the handling of the paint is, and this is what you look for in a great Schofield or in a great American Impressionist painting, that sense of vitality and life that comes from the paint handling itself. We love it in museums to look at the back of our paintings and glean information from the stickers there. And on the back of Early Winter Morning is a sticker from the Maxwell Galleries in San Francisco, a gallery that a gallery that Schofield worked with in the late 1930s. And he was in San Francisco in the late 1930s, and he worked with this gallery, in the 1940s. And you can see they say winter landscape artist Walter Elmer Schofield. They give the size, price, $10,000. So $10,000, that might not seem like a lot, but if you go on to Google and look at their, value purchasing power of the dollar scaling chart, $10,000 in 1940, has the purchasing power in today's terms of $200,000. This is a painting that sold for quite a bit of money. It's thrilling, really thrilling to have it back in public hands. But that is to give you a sense that in 1940, American taste is changing towards abstraction already. Pennsylvania Impressionism is not, the top of the line in terms of what people are thinking about in American art. It's, the Great Depression is happening. We're thinking of social realism in the 1930s and 40s. Still at that time, paintings by Schofield are selling for substantial sums of money. Early Winter Morning also needed a good frame. It had a frame that was frankly not up to not up to the quality of the painting itself. And again, my friend Dean Kahn helped us out. We looked for inspiration at the Winter on the Wissahickon frame, which has an authentic Harrer frame on it. You see that in the lower right. And we scaled it up to be proportional to the early winter morning painting. And so now it has the type of frame that Schofield was really instrumental in creating the taste for these great arts and crafts frames that his friends made. And the painting looks beautiful. I love the frame. And I thought what I might do is just share a little bit about how a frame like this is actually made, because Ben Badura and Frederick Harrer, they also went to PAFA and had distinguished careers as painters, but they were making frames on the side. And they were particularly inspired by the frames of the American Renaissance. They were inspired by the frames of the Italian Renaissance. They created the frames of the American Renaissance, the arts and crafts frames that are so prized by Badura and Harrer. So I'm showing here, I'll walk us across this complicated slide of many images. They were looking at Italian Renaissance frames at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. You see one such Italian early frame here, and it's called a plank style frame. Why is it called a plank style frame? Because it's made out of 4 planks. A good plank frame is made with joinery at the corners, which is substantially stronger than a mitered corner frame. And so you can see how basically 2 planks of wood are joined together at the corner. If you go down looking at the column where the raw wood is, glued onto the surface are an inner and an outer rail. Those are called rails. Those are simply glued onto the surface of the plank. And what's so nice about that is it leaves this large expanse, this kind of running rail of the plank, where the Renaissance artist or Badura and Harrer, or in today's time, Dean Kahn, can have some fun, and they enjoyed what they did, on those planks. The next step would be about 10 layers of a liquid gesso, which softened the edges of the railings, and then on top of the gesso would be added something called a red or a black. Actually, they're earth tones. It's like a ground ceramic powder paint. The types of colors that you see in Native American pottery, the same kind of substances that are used in this red bull. It's an underlying color that you see in Renaissance frames. It's used. It's got when it's wet, it becomes somewhat sticky. And it's what the gold or the silver leaf will actually stick to, but then it glows through and shows through, the surface of the gold leafed frame. So when you look at a good Harrer frame or a good Badura frame, you always kind of pay attention to what is the color that's showing through the surface. And an artist like Schofield would have been very particular about that. Would there be a red glow coming through the edge of the frame, or would it be black or gray or brown? There even, I've heard of sort of, gold under silver in these frames. And then what's so wonderful about these frames are the patterning and the punch work. And Badura and Harrer are, again, they're going to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. They're looking at paintings like the Masaccio Marcellino that I'm showing on the left, where you can see that wonderful punch work and almost graffiti-like pattern making, in the gold surface. And that's what's inspiring them to create these wonderful frames. On the very right, you can see on the top the cross section of an example of a frame. You can see, the original plank, the gluing on of rails, as well as the layer of gesso and how thick that is and how it softens the edges. And then down below in the center, the corner with the fleur-de-lis of the frame for Montmartre, and down below, Early Winter Morning, that's that frame. I had to talk a little bit about Schofield and Redfield together. They were rivals for the big prizes, and although they started out as friends, they did not end up as friends. Edith Emerson, the director of Woodmere, tried to broker happiness between the two of them, and she chided them both for being such children. They refused to go to each other's exhibitions later in life, and still kind of held grudges against each other for what they felt were prizes that they should have gotten that the other artists got. I'm showing Redfield's Late Afternoon next to Schofield's Hill Country. Whereas Redfield, and again, this is a conversation that I've had so many times with my friend Brian Peterson. Redfield is truly bringing gigantic canvases outdoors in the middle of winter, 6-foot canvases, devising ways to hold them down in the wind and the snow, and to paint a scene to capture the effect, the experience of a moment. Schofield is working outdoors. He's making sketches on plein air and then working in the studio to devise these grand compositions. Schofield, I feel, is much more of a designer and sculptor of the landscape as an illusion in space. Redfield is trying to create that instantaneous feeling of the moment. What does it feel like to be, to look across the Delaware River in New Hope and see Lambertville, New Jersey there? What they share is a certain, What they share is a certain kind of linear energy painting on top of creamy surfaces, this energetic kind of trees and twigs or weeds coming up in the ditch in the Schofield painting. But there is something that these artists share that, that often does lead people to, misidentify Schofield for Redfield and vice versa. And I see that all the time happening, but because they do share certain qualities, but they're very different artists in temperament. And, while Schofield was a funny guy who was affable and had a real sense of humor, Redfield was something of a curmudgeon. And I'm showing here some cartoons that Schofield made, making fun of Redfield in a letter to his friend John Sloan from November 18th, 1904. I guess that is 111 years ago, yesterday. But here, Schofield has won a prize. That's him at a moment of having gotten overweight. He's got the first prize in the Carnegie International that he won in 1904, and that is the hand of Redfield reaching over as if to take it away. He describes that in his letter to his friend John Sloan, and he provides a little limerick. He didn't, about himself, that is Schofield, he didn't expect it. He thought that the jury was rigged in favor of Redfield. He didn't expect it. Schofield, didn't expect it and was struck apoplectic, but prompt medical aid brought the blood from his head, and so he was saved. But then he says, outside of the limerick, down at the bottom, he says, well, I can't read it because, but his mind never cleared. So Schofield and Redfield, yeah, they went at it with each other and were very different temperaments. The two fields of Pennsylvania Impressionism. 1916, Schofield believes the United States is taking too long to enter into World War I. He is worried that England and France will be destroyed. And he volunteers for the Royal Garrison Artillery of Cornwall, England. And there you see him at the center. He was a lieutenant in the army. He was apparently a powerful soldier. He was promoted. He served in the Battle of the Somme and in the very final battles that led to the German surrender in 1918 in World War I, experiencing some of the bloodiest of the bloodiest war. And among the very first paintings he makes coming out of the war experience are paintings that are perhaps the things that are most identified with Schofield, these views of the Cornwall coast, showing morning tide, which is perhaps the largest of the Cornwall paintings by Schofield. This came to Woodmere through the family's gift in 1944, Morning Tide of 1920, painted right after the war. Schofield is looking down at the tide as it comes in and as it goes out, and there's something eternal there. On the right, Lapping Tides, a recent gift from Peg to Woodmere. Again, Lapping Tides, probably made, on site. You can see Schofield there wearing a suit and a tie on the cliffs at Cornwall, painting on his easel. He's making small paintings on plein air and then transforming them into larger paintings in the studio. When I asked Peg once, well, what was the impact of the war, the emotional impact of the war on Schofield and as it manifests in his paintings? And she said she felt that there was a nostalgia that he always had thereafter for a time when, life was simpler and, that the violence of the 20th century hadn't overtaken European civilization. And Peg pointed to this painting, which was then on the wall in her apartment. It's called Philack Bridge. And she said, I see that nostalgia in the reflection in the water. And that water, the rippling, wavy reflections of the building in the water. And I find that to be a compelling way for me to think about Schofield's ongoing meditation on, the rocky coast of Cornwall and, the ocean coming in and flowing out. Schofield is certainly thinking of other artists who are painting Cornwall and the Cornish coast and the Normandy coast, in the case of Claude Monet and William Trost Richards, who he certainly knew in Philadelphia. And there is absolutely a romanticism, but Schofield is getting something very different out of the Cornish coast than other artists. Monet and that extraordinary burst of light underneath the Maniport at Étretat, or the sort of mystical grandeur that William Trost Richards conjures. For Schofield, there's a real sense of the materiality of the stones themselves, the solidity of those stones, and the fluidity of the water and the interaction between those forces as something of an eternal force. Schofield is well known for painting, again, in the 1920s, these wonderful harbor scenes, the kinds of beautiful old world harbors all over Cornwall and throughout France. The harbor, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce, Mevagissey. You see a photograph of the harbor town as it exists today. It is still a lovely place to visit, as I understand it. I've never been there. It is my good friend Terry Dolan who has pointed out that the Grenouillère, the French Impressionists focus on scenes of leisure, and particularly, these great pictures where the forms of boats float in these harbors and provide delight to the people who were there, are certainly an inspiration here for Schofield in his harbor scenes. And we've got this very beautiful one. Schofield is painting cottages in the winter and in the summer in Cornwall. In the 1930s, he goes out to California and Arizona. The American West becomes the thing that he loves. And I am thrilled that in part of the recent gift from Peg, boats at dock San Pedro. San Pedro, if you know Los Angeles, that's the port of Los Angeles. It was then a fishing village, a fishing port. Now it's a big industrial port. Schofield was enchanted by the place. He painted in the desert in Arizona and was interested. There are several paintings of this wonderful mine. He painted the Tujunga Valley. And you can see that in these paintings from the 1930s, Schofield is getting looser and looser with his paint. And, one does wonder, where, this may have been going. Schofield really liked the light and the energy and the freedom that he sensed in California, and he wrote about that. Sadly, though, by the late 1930s, Schofield is succumbing to illness. He's diabetic. He makes his last trip to England to spend time living at Godolphin with his son Sidney and his son Sidney's family. The Second World War breaks out, and Schofield can no longer travel back to the United States. It's not safe to do so. He's also not completely well. And Schofield's last paintings are made on the Godolphin estate. And true to form, he does not paint the great mansion and its spectacular historic architecture. He's attracted to the streams in the woods on the property, and first snowfall in the gift from Peg, a painting made in England at Godolphin, but the sort of painting that I have seen many times described as the Wissahickon. We know that Schofield really, really missed Philadelphia. He missed the Wissahickon. And, I love these late paintings. They've got an energy to them and a lyrical quality. I love the way in this particular painting, a tree on the left and a tree on the right seem to reach out to each other. And, I think of that as a metaphor of, it's across the pond. There's something special about this painting to me. But a part of it is that he's making, the forest at Godolphin into his own personal Wissahickon, and I find that quite moving. Schofield would die at Godolphin in 1944. Per his wishes, his remains were brought back to Philadelphia, and he was buried in the cemetery at St. James the Less, and you can actually see his tombstone when you're driving by on, right there, at St. James the Less, adjacent to Laurel Hill Cemetery. Another gift from Peg, although it's not a tangible gift. This painting, also made at Godolphin, I believe, by Schofield, very loose, daring-looking painting, was stolen from Peg. It was stolen from her country house in Great Barrington. She reported it, rightfully so, to the FBI. If it ever materializes, Woodmere has inherited the right to own this painting. So if you see it at auction, call us up immediately. We will alert the FBI, which will take possession of it, whether it's in a gallery or in an auction house or wherever it may be. That is what happens with stolen art. There is a registry that the FBI keeps. Peg has always wished that this painting would materialize, and I hope it does too, because it looks like an interesting one, and we would like it to join our Schofield collection at Woodmere. I'm glad at this point to answer questions. Joe, Anne, I don't know if you're fielding questions. I also want to make a little bit of promotion. It breaks my heart that we're going to have a digital circle of trees this year, our great Santa Claus event at Woodmere. But Santa Claus is in fact going to come. Rick and Jeanette have set up a Christmas tree to die for with tassels and hot pink and hand-blown Christmas balls surrounded by works of art. Please join us on Zoom on Saturday for a Santa event. Kids Care workshop, children make works of art for people who are homebound to be delivered by Manna, art making and storytelling. And then if you haven't had enough of Schofield, my good friend Paul Dussault, the painter, artist, is incredibly articulate. Paul is going to offer a gallery talk on Schofield, looking at these paintings from the point of view of a painter. That will also take place on Zoom, Wednesday, December 9th at 7 p.m. And you can get the links to all of these things on Woodmere's website. As you can see, we have a digital catalog for the exhibition on Woodmere's website. You can have it printed for yourself, directly from the website and have it mailed to you, or you can contact us, or you can just enjoy reading it online. I believe that's what most people do. So with that, thank you all very much. And I am glad to answer any questions about the exhibition or Schofield or anything that may be on your mind. So thank you. Anne and Joe, do I have you? Let's see if, do we have any questions?
Hey, Bill, we do actually. Our very own Pam Luce wonders, Schofield's father was such a businessman. What did he think of his son being an artist?
Well, that's a very good question. My understanding is that he had a hard time of it. This I know from Peg, and I had asked her this. Schofield's father was a businessman, and he didn't quite get the productivity of being an artist. What we believe is that he did understand eventually the idea of an artist being trained at the academy, of acquiring skills that could then be applied. But it was not something he was thrilled about. What was fortunate in the family was that Schofield's brother, Albert, did have a head for business. So when Schofield's father died, brother Albert ran the business and, in essence, allowed the family to be supportive. And, what's sort of amazing in the story too is a very successful American thread business. He sold it, and I could get this wrong, but I think it was in like 1928 or 29. So right before the Great Depression, sold the business to a New Orleans-based fabric and thread company. And the family invested that money and, was able to, be comfortable thereafter.
There's also one from Eileen a little bit ago. She wondered, do you think the conflict, this is between Schofield and Redfield, was out of recognition of each other's talent?
I think so. I think that I think there's a degree to which they saw a little bit of themselves in each other, and yet they were such different people. I mean, two more different personalities. I didn't know either of them, but if you read about them or read their writing or talk about, if you read primary documents, very, very different kinds of people and very different kinds of artists, wonderful artists. And they were competing with each other. They were winning top prizes and they thought that they should win the prizes that the other one won. But there's a rivalry there. There's a story Peg told me that that Redfield, would not even come to the memorial show after Schofield had died. And she said, come on, get over it, come see the show, because she had given Redfield a show at Woodmere as well. And he just couldn't come.
Another one just came in from Marion. Is there any documentation of Redfield's animus towards Schofield?
Is there any documentation of? I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Can you
I'm
just
sorry. Is there any documentation of Redfield's animus towards Schofield?
It is in the, again, it is in the, the archival material, say at a place like Woodmere where we have Edith Emerson's papers, for example. And, it's from family reminiscences, for example, Peg, you know, uh, carried, these are oral histories that are, passed down through generations.
Evelyn's wondering.
But I can just say that that letter from Schofield to Sloan is in the Sloan archives at the Delaware Art Museum. And the kind of friction within that whole group of Henry, Glacken, Sloan, Redfield, Schofield, it plays out in those documents, and not only in Schofield's papers, but in Sloan's papers as well.
Evelyn asked, were any of the paintings in the exhibit not shown tonight? She wants to see them hopefully online.
Actually, there are. I feel like I spoke for even a long time as it is. I cut a lot out, so there's more to see. And what I hope is that Paul will, focus on paintings that I didn't focus on, or will certainly have a different take on a lot of the same paintings. But there's more to see. And I would say all of Woodmere's paintings by Schofield are not on view in the exhibition. There are more paintings. We didn't have the gallery space for them. I'm sorry about that, but all of the paintings that came to Woodmere as the result of the generosity of Peg Phillips, the paintings that came to Woodmere over the last 2 years from Peg, all of those paintings are on view. And we're very honored and pleased by that.
Anybody else have any more questions? Evelyn thinks we should have a Schofield part 2, Bill.
Oh, well, I could do that. I am so happy that, Woodmere, becomes the home for Schofield. And the dream, and I think a lot of people who are on this call probably knows my dream, is to convert the second floor of Woodmere's main building into a gallery that can certainly showcase our great paintings by Schofield, but also our great collection of Pennsylvania Impressionism. Woodmere, again, thanks to Edith, has a deep and long history with Pennsylvania Impressionism. And it's something that we need to be showing. And that is the dream, that these paintings will be able to be on view all the time.
Oh, this just one more just came in from Eileen again. She asks, do you know Schofield's total output?
So the answer is no, I don't. He was a prolific artist, and I'm going to say I would not be surprised if, there's got to be over 1,000 known paintings by Schofield. That would be my guess if I had to sort of put a ballpark, but there may be more.
I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and feel free to email us any questions. You can email them to me at astandish@woodmereartmuseum.org, and I'll get them to Bill and get them answered for you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Anne. And let me thank everyone for joining us tonight. I am discouraged that the museum has to be closed. However, I do, we are going to do more with this online. We're happy to have more interactive kinds of programs and conversations about the exhibition. If that's of interest to people, please let us know. We want, the work that we want to do over these times of closure is to engage with the art, with people. So if there's something that you would like to see happen that we can do over Zoom or that we can do outdoors at Woodmere, please let the ideas flow. The work of the museum continues even though the gallery is closed. And we thank you for joining us tonight. Well, with that, I think I'll say, unless another question has come in under the wire, I'm going to say thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you have enjoyed it. Joe will be sending out a survey just to get feedback and thoughts. Did I put everybody to sleep? What, please let us know. We always want to know how we can improve everything that we do. Please enjoy the catalog. You can find it online. Participate in our other events online. Be well and safe. Happy Thanksgiving, and all best to everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.